Hello, everybody. I'm Steve Andrews, and I'm here again giving a talk about herbs and my books. And I hope you can all hear me okay, and I hope you can all see me. I also hope that this bloody internet works. So anyway, I'm going to be talking about my books. My books are this one, Herbs of the Northern Shaman, and followed that with Herbs of the Southern Shaman, and Herbs of the Sun, Moon, and Planets, and that's the one I'm going to be talking about most tonight. But first of all, I'd just like to say that herbs are very much a part of nature and a part of our lives, and we use them in so many different ways. I mean, I first came across herbs when I was a little boy, and that's when I first discovered nature. And the herbs I discovered was mint in the garden and thyme in the garden and sage. And my granddad used to keep bees, and he had marjoram for the bees. And so I learned about these herbs then, and my mum used to use mint for making mint sauce. And we used to put that on, with the lamb on the Sunday dinner. And this was my introduction to herbs. And then, as I got older, I started to find out a lot more about them. And for me, nature has always been about discovery. There's always more to be learned. And I used to consult books, and now we can consult the internet, and you can consult like just experience. You can just go out and find things. And on the subject of finding things, foraging is very popular today, which is good. And I know a lot about that. But what I wanted to say is that most of the herbs that I'm be talking about, you can find, and depending on where you are in the world, you should be able to find some herbs which are in the book Sun, Moon, and Planets. For example, the pine tree, that's a herb of Jupiter, and I'll explain about that later. But you can find pine trees in most places, and so. I'll explain a little bit about all of that, about what I mean about the herbs of the sun, moon, and planets. But first of all, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the herbs of the northern shaman and the southern shaman. And what I'm looking at in these books is herbs which have been used that can affect the mind in some way. And so you have like herbs which are hallucinogenic, and they can transport the user into a different reality. And these have been very much in use by shamans worldwide, and also by people who practice witchcraft. And some of these plants are very dangerous. And so, I make that point in the book. These are plants that, yes, this is what has been done with them and what they can be used for, but a word of warning, that they're dangerous plants. So there's something which, needs to be considered. But there's a lot of other plants which are much milder and have different effects. And some plants have multi-purpose. Some plants, you can use as a culinary herb for, in the kitchen, or maybe to make a herbal tea. Some herbs you can use for treating medicinal, for their medicinal problems. And some have other effects as well. And often it depends on the dosage of the plant. And so all these things are what you learn about if you're interested in herbalism. And I'm just going to mention some of the herbs. Like in this book, like Herbs of the Northern Shaman, I tried to concentrate on herbs which can be found in the Northern Hemisphere and have some sort of effect on the mind of the user. So besides the hallucinogenic plants, I've included ones with sedative and tranquilizing properties, ones which have an antidepressant effect, like the St. John's wort, and they're all plant, also stimulant herbs. So all of these plants affect the mind of the user, and some of them are really well known, like the cannabis plant and the morning glory, and some of the plants are also. I find that they fitted into like more than one of my books. For example, the morning glory, which I just mentioned, that is actually a herb of Saturn, as well as a herb that's used by the shamanic people. And it also got used by a lot of sort of what people which we call hippie types, of which I used to be one. Maybe I still am in some ways. And that was because it contains lysergic acid amide, which is about the closest you could get to sort of LSD. And because it used to be legal, it still is legal. The Morning Glory seeds contain this. And so people used to buy the seeds and take them for a trip. And of course, because it has that sort of hallucinogenic effect, it was used by the shamans of the various tribal peoples, and probably still is. So that was the reason why it got included in my Northern Shaman book. But it's in my book of the herbs of the sun, moon, and planets, because it's a herb of Saturn. And which I'm going to talk about this now, I think, basically. I mean, you see that title and you think, well, that's crazy stuff. Herbs of the sun, moon, and planets. How can there be any herbs on the sun and on the moon and on the other planets? These places are all barren or too hot or whatever, too cold or gas, or nothing can grow. And that's true. But we're not talking about that. What we're talking about is an ancient system which combines sort of astrology with herbalism. And the ancient herbalists used to look at the planetary deities, the astrological deities, and what they were linked with. So, for example, the god Mars was thought of as the god of war. And so characteristics of war was something violent, something aggressive, something spiky maybe, like a sword or a lance, or maybe today a gun. That would be like something to do with war, the god Mars. And then the goddess Venus, she was the goddess of love. So it was all to do with sensuality, sexuality, love. That was to do with the goddess Venus. The Mercury was a messenger of the gods. And that gave me a lot to think about, actually, because when I was putting this book together, I was trying to put my head into, what one of these ancient herbalists was thinking. I was like actually, Nicholas Culpeper was one of the main ones. He was a very famous herbalist. And I thought, well, if I was Nicholas Culpeper, how would I go about sort of saying which herbs go under which planetary sign? How do I make these distinctions? What am I looking for? And with some of them, it was easy. Like I just said, with Mars, you could think, oh, something aggressive about it. Oh, we can say that it's ruled by Mars. But with Mercury, I said, now what's that about? And Mercury is the messenger of the gods. So it's something which communicates. Communication is the kind of the key word. And so a lot of the herbs which are ruled by Mercury have got a lot of communicative qualities to them. That they really say something to us, to our senses. And then Jupiter, we were looking at Jupiter. Jupiter is a gas planet, and it's all about sort of expanding. And so there are several trees which are ruled by Jupiter because the tree expands out. It goes up with the trunk and then the branches go out. So you can see how it expands. And the moon, and I forgot to talk about the sun. The sun, of course, is the giver of light. The sun radiates the light out, the sun's rays, and it beams the light down on all of us down here. It's a giver of life and light, the two things. And it's like an eye. It's like an eye in the sky. It's got like a circular part, and then the rays go out. So there were some plants which were obvious candidates for being a herb ruled by the sun. And I think one of the main ones is the sunflower. I'm sure you won't be surprised if I say the sunflower is ruled by the sun. And that's because you've got the yellow disc in the middle, and then you've got all the petals all around it radiating out like the sun's rays. And based on that, the chamomile is also a herb of the sun. And I brought you, some things along to show you all. And I've got, for example, here, I've got a box of chamomile tea bags. Because a lot of these herbs, as I was saying, they've got multiple purposes. And a lot of the herbs we use in our daily lives. And I could buy these chamomile tea bags in the supermarket here. I'm in Portugal, by the way. I don't think I said that. And This is another herb that you can buy tea bags here in Portugal. This is fennel, and here they call it inocho, and also called a funcho. Fennel, and that is a herb of Mercury, which, as I was just saying, Mercury is something which it's the god of the messenger of the gods, and it's communication. Fennel, right? I mean, fennel. It's got a beautiful smell, and I got some here. This is not particularly very good fennel, but this is fennel. And like if I crush that, it's got that really strong, like aniseed smell to it. And when I say this isn't a very good one, this is because it's been very hot and dry here in Portugal. But in Britain and in cooler and damper places, you get like a nice yellow, golden yellow umbel flower. It has like really feathery leaves. And so it's a really pretty plant to look at. And you think, oh, look at that. And so that's the fennel plant. You crush a little bit of the leaf or the seeds of the flowers, and you've got that aniseed aroma. And so again, so it has a nice taste and aroma, and you could use it maybe in foods. You can make a sauce with it, fennel sauce, and you can make herbal teas like I've just shown you. But so that's one, and that is a herb of Mercury because it communicates. And I've got here, this is some lavender. I know, and again, it's looking a bit rough because if you could see this in the spring, it's beautiful. This is French lavender, and it grows wild here in Portugal. And these are the old flower heads, and they're brown. But you know, in spring, early summer, this is like nice lavender, violet purple color to the flower heads, and the smell of lavender. A lovely herb. And again, it's got all those characteristics that communicate to our senses. We can smell the lavender. We can look at it. We see the purple flowers. We can crush it up. And we can use it for various things. For example, lavender has been used to repel moths. You put some lavender, say, in your clothing, in the wardrobe. So it's lavender. I've explained about the sun, but also like the moon. You can wonder, well, like what are the characteristics of herbs of the moon? And often it was something to do with like round, because the full moon is round. So they decided that the water lily is a herb of the moon because, of course, it's got the round leaves. And also the water lily grows in water. And then there's the connection there, you see, because the tides are ruled by the moon. So some of the plants which are the herbs of the moon have got a connection with water, and that's how they decided they would assign them under the moon. One of those I've got here, this is a willow. Now, there are many species of willow, and I'm not an expert on willow trees, but most of the willow trees like to grow by water. Of course, the most famous one being like the weeping willow. And here in Portugal, this willow that I've got here, it grows down in an area which gets quite sort of wet in the winter. And it likes to grow in wet ground. So there you are, that's the connection with water, connection with the moon. And I picked this up. This is wilting. I'm sorry about that. This is a little sprig of mint. And again, this is a herb of Mercury. Why? Because crush that up. And it's got a really strong minty smell to it. You taste it. It's got the minty taste. As I said, when I was a little boy, my mum used to make mint sauce with it. You put it in your food. It gives a flavor. And you can get like, mint flavored sweets and mint tea. So many uses for mint, but more than one thing, a perfume and a flavor to it. And they put it under Mercury, a messenger. I got one here, this is rosemary. And again, now the rosemary, it's got a strong smell and a strong flavor, and you can use it for various things. So you might think, well, it's a herb of Mercury. But no, it's not. It's a herb of the sun. And that one, I had to think about that. And I thought, well, how is this a herb of the sun, you know? And I decided that it's because it likes to grow in a sunny climate, in a sunny place. Like the rosemary grows wild in Portugal and in other parts of the Mediterranean. It'll grow on a hot, sunny kind of hillside here. So that, I think, is why it was put as the herb of the sun. And I mentioned Venus, the goddess of love. This is wilting, I'm afraid. It's a little bit of rose bush here. I'm afraid I couldn't find any roses in flower right now, but I thought I better bring a little bit of rose in. And the rose, of course, is associated with love. You know, you think of the red rose. You want to show your love for somebody, you give them the red rose. And so that was the association there. And there were some other herbs which come under Venus, which are not so obvious. I went to look for, but I couldn't find any. Periwinkle is one. Periwinkle is a herb of Venus. And it was associated with spells to cause love. And it was even believed that if you put some periwinkle under the bed of lovers, it would make them sort of more passionate. So there are all sorts of strange kind of ideas that filtered into folklore and have been handed down. And another one of the herbs of Venus is the vervain. And as I said, like some of these herbs, they cross over, they've got various purposes. And so the vervain was one of the most sacred herbs for the Druids. And the vervain has got tranquilizing properties. And so because of that, this is why it's in my Herbs of the Northern Shaman book. And vervain is a very pretty little flower. And I don't know if you know the vervain, it's got like a very tiny, like lilac flowers. And it's very sort of, very weak. And so it looks pretty kind of, when I say weak, it's a really delicate is probably a better word, delicate looking plant. And it grows in many places. I know, like it used to grow in the park here, in some kind of an area where the ground had been turned over. There isn't any there right now, but it's a plant that you can find, you know, it just kind of crops up here and there. But as I said, it's been regarded as one of the most sacred of all herbs for the Druids. And it's found many uses medicinally because it has like tranquilizing properties. And it's a herb of Venus. So again, if you were practicing witchcraft and you wanted to do a ritual to do with love, you know, maybe you'd have some rose, maybe you'd have some vervain. And maybe you'd have some incense, you know, with a rose incense or something like that, you know, because it's all to do with correspondences and the associations that we have. And so that's another one of the herbs of Venus. And we're talking about herbs of the moon, and I told you about the willow. And I was also talking about the water lily. There was a water lily down the road in one of my neighbor's ponds, but I could hardly sort of go in there and nick some of their water lily to bring for you. But what I did bring, and I'll get this now. Cool. This is a dragon tree. And you can see that this dragon tree, lift it up. It's got very spiky leaves, and because of the spiky leaves, it was decided it was a herb of Mars. And this is a very small dragon tree. It's a dragon tree that I've grown from seed. And I discovered dragon trees when I went to Tenerife. I moved to Tenerife in end of 2004. And one of the first things that amazed me when I was there was I was with my friend Priscilla, and we were walking in Santa Cruz. We saw this huge tree. I said, "Oh God, what on earth is that? It's amazing." And she said, "It's a drago. It's a dragon tree." And I thought, "Wow, that's fantastic." And it was like a really tall one. And that's one of the things that the dragon trees, so you can grow for thousands of years. And there's one in a place in Tenerife called Ico de los Pinos, and it's called the Dragon Moulinario. And it's believed to be 1,000 years old. Some people say even older than that. Some people bring it down a bit and say 650 years. But however old it is, it's very old, and it's very big, and it's very wide. And it's like an experience, you know, to be under this dragon tree. You think, "Oh, wow, look at that." And the thing that, you know, that I was telling you earlier about the dragon tree is because and you've just seen it now, it's got spiky leaves. So that's one of the things whereby a herbalist would have said, "Oh, that's to do with Mars." But it's not only that. Also, if you think about Mars, the god of war, violence was to do with war. So bloodletting would have been to do with war. So something red could have been to do with war. And the dragon tree has red berries. Yeah, so there's another thing there, another association. And this is a really weird one. If you cut the trunk, the resin which comes out, when it dries, it goes dark red like blood, and they call this dragon's blood. And it's been used in the occult as dragon's blood. It could be used in something to do with Mars, to do with war, to do with anything where there was some sort of aggression was being looked for. And the trees grow in the Canary Islands, and they will grow very, very big, as I said, very, very tall, very wide. And they could be here for thousands of years. Now, of course, this one here I've grown for, I'm never going to see it, you know, in all of its glory, a massive dragon tree one day. But they're very slow growing, and they can take like, you know, 10 years to grow about this high. It's a very interesting tree. As I say, one of the first things I discovered in Tenerife that made me go, "Wow, look at that. What is that? It's a dragon tree, incredible." And I'm going kind of a little off subject, but I think I'll go there anyway. The Guanches were the people who lived in Tenerife before the Spanish invasion long ago. And the dragon tree was very important to them. They used to make shields out of it. And they also used to hold meetings underneath the dragon tree. So that's a little bit more about it. But what else have I got? I was going to say, yeah, this is the pine. And the pine is a herb of Jupiter. And the pine is a tree you can find, you know, around the world. You're likely to be able to find pine trees in your area. And the pine has got various uses. You know, we can use the resin from the pine tree. You can make a herbal tea from the pine, very good for you. You can eat the pine nuts, which you can use the fir cones. You know, maybe for making fire. They use them over here in Portugal a lot, with popular, as I said, for making fire. You know, use them in barbecues. But also, the pine it's a tree that's just really well known, and it adds beauty to the countryside. So, you know, there's many parts of the world where, unfortunately, right now we're losing pines, we're losing forests. But you know, Siberia and Alaska and over here in Portugal, many of the forests are pine. So that's a pine tree, and it's a herb of Jupiter because it expands out with its branches. And it's a herb you can find in most parts of the world. And that was something that I got thinking about a lot. You can go out and see what herbs you can find, which are herbs of the sun or the moon, or Mars or Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, Mercury. And you should be able to find some. One here, which I show you, is the St. John's wort, St. John's wort, some people say. And that's a herb of the sun. And maybe you can guess why, because it's golden yellow, yeah, and the petals all sort of radiate out like a star. And of course, the sun is a star. Here in Portugal, the St. John's wort, it grows much earlier, so you can find it in flower in March, April, May. But in Britain and in many places, it's associated with midsummer. And so you find it like midsummer, 21st, 22nd, 23rd of June, and that's when you would harvest it. So that was its association with the sun. And another herb, I just saw this on the front cover of this book here. This is the thorn apple. I don't know if you can see that. So the thorn apple, the datura. And where I live here in Portugal, these are datura seed pods. And what happened here was that there's an area of kind of scrubland and some forest. And for some reason, about 6 months ago, a team of workmen turned up there and they installed some new street lamps along the road. And then they got bulldozers and they bulldozed through a lot of the ground there, and they felled some trees and they ripped up a load of scrub. And I thought, oh my God, what are they doing? They're destroying everything. And they dug a big trench, and I thought, oh, they're going to put some pipelines in, but they didn't do that. They didn't put any pipelines in. They all cleared off and they left it. So of course it's being reclaimed by nature. And one of the things which has appeared is this, the datura, and it's doing very well over there. And it's a herb with several properties and magical connections. For example, it was used in flying ointment by witches. Witches would make flying ointment, and they would put pretty poisonous, dangerous herbs into that flying ointment. It's one of them. Some of the others which we used in the flying ointment was deadly nightshade and henbane. And this is interesting because the deadly nightshade, which I haven't got any of, that's a herb of Saturn, and the henbane is a herb of Saturn. And this is because they're linked with the Grim Reaper. They're linked with death. They're linked with time. Now, the datura, the thorn apple, is also a very poisonous plant, but it's not in the herbs of Saturn. It's in the herbs of Jupiter. And I got to thinking about that, and I thought, well, why is that? If Jupiter's to do with expansion, why is the datura in the herbs of Jupiter? And I looked at the plant, and the plant comes up, and its stems, its stalks, it sort of branch out like that. And not only that, but these seed pods, if you knock one of these, or if the wind blows into them, the seeds go all over the place. So that's how it distributes itself. It gets out like that. It expands. And so I could see, why the datura was put in the herbs of Jupiter. But why it's in this book here, not only is it used in flying ointment, but it's a very, very potent hallucinogenic herb, and it's been used in initiation rites by some tribal peoples. But it's certainly not recommended at all. As a hallucinogenic plant, it is dangerous. But it came to fame many years ago in the works of Hunter S. Thompson. It's in It's in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. It's also in the Carlos Castaneda book. Some of you will be familiar with them as a plant teacher. It's in the teachings of Don Juan. But, that being said, it's one of these plants that, it's much better to look at it and to know about it, but don't use it because it's very, very poisonous. And that's the thorn apple. And I think it's a very interesting looking plant just to consider. Like, just look at that. And it always reminds me a bit of a horse chestnut, a conker. It's got that spiky seed pod. And by what I was telling you about Mars, you could think, oh well, it should have been a herb ruled by Mars because it's aggressive, but no, it wasn't. And as I said, I was thinking about, like, how did the herbalists come to all these decisions? And that was something for me, which was a big part of my creation of this book, about thinking about how the various plants were assigned to the different planets. One I've got here, gosh, it's falling apart. I got here, this is a cork oak. And as I told you, I can't remember what I mentioned earlier, but the oak tree is another of the herbs of Jupiter. And this is a cork oak. And this is an acorn. You can see that acorn there, and the little acorns. See them? And here in Portugal, there are plenty of cork oaks. In fact, 50% of the cork in the world comes from Portugal. So this is a very important tree that grows here. And in other countries, including Britain, there are many other types of oak tree. And the oaks are all under the sign of Jupiter. They're all ruled by Jupiter because they expand out with their branches. But the oak, of course, is a very, very important tree for the Druids. And which brings me to the mistletoe. A mistletoe is a herb that everybody's familiar with. And the mistletoe is a herb of the sun. And that's because it was harvested at midsummer solstice. And the druid that would cut the mistletoe down from a branch of the oak would use a sickle with a golden blade. And gold is associated with the sun. And the mistletoe would be growing in the oak. It would grow in other trees, but if it was found in the oak tree, it was thought to be the most potent, the most sacred of the mistletoe you could collect. And you would collect that on midsummer solstice. So that's its association with the sun. And as I said earlier, there's often like various links between all these things. And for me, one of the things which I just think is magical, if you like, and is so wonderful, is that there's all this complexity and the linking of things together, the joining of the dots and finding out more and more. And you can kind of start anywhere in the world and go in any direction and find out more and more and more stuff. And it's been like that for me all my life. And, I'm learning all the time. Like every day I learn something. And that for me is one of the pleasures in life, like, the learning and trying to, to work out the whole puzzle of it all. And it's the most, life and the universe and everything. It's just the most amazing puzzle that anybody could come up with, and it's just amazing. It's just magical. And I'm sure a lot of you realize that anyway, so that's nothing new coming from me. But it's one of my pleasures in life is finding out about stuff. And back to the cork oak tree, which I was just talking about. This is a piece of cork bark. Yeah, and this is what they harvest, and this is the cork that you use for making the corks for your wine bottles. And it's a very interesting tree because they can cut this bark away, which has got the cork in it. And if they leave the tree for a number of years, the bark grows back. And so the tree isn't killed by the harvesting of its bark. And it's a very important crop. It's something where you've got like a traditional farming means, a traditional means of harvesting, which is used for cutting the cork bark away. And it's an example of where a traditional crop is not sort of out of sync, out of harmony with nature. Whereas unfortunately today we've got lots of sort of monoculture, which is causing major problems, but other forms of farming aren't. And over here in Portugal, there's a lot of people would like to see more of these native trees sort of grown instead of the eucalyptus trees, which we've got here, which are here for the paper industry. And when we get fires, the eucalyptus trees tend to just go up in a blaze. And then unfortunately, the eucalyptus tree, because it comes from Australia, it was built to withstand the fire, and so it regenerates, it comes back. And so that's another part of life, and another part of the mystery of it all. You need to get to think about, what plants are suited to what part of the planet. And I think that one of the hi Barbara. One of the things that I think is why everything is in such a mess right now is because people have used things without understanding what they're doing, and we have to know like what is suited to what, and we have to understand the associations and the uses for things and how one thing sort of, what its link is with something else. And so, the eucalyptus tree in Australia is ideal because they get a lot of hot weather over there. They get a lot of fires over there. They get too many now, but they used to get fires anyway. And they used to get a lot of hot weather. And the eucalyptus was suited for that. The eucalyptus is the food for the koala bear. And so, that's part of it. Its role in life is a food tree for koalas. But they brought it over here to Portugal because it can grow fast, and they can sell it to the paper industry for making paper. But it as a competitive plant, it's become like an invasive species, and so and this is the problem which has gone all around the world. We've had people take something, an animal or a plant from one part to another, and they think it's a good idea at the time, but it turns out to be a disaster. It's because they didn't really understand at the time like what they were doing. They didn't look at all the different uses and the properties and the links that that plant or animal has and what its part is in the ecosystem. And these are things we need to know. And so I'm sort of going from there just to say that for me, the study of herbalism, the study of the uses of herbs, all comes under that. And the more you can learn about any plant, the better. And when I think about the shamans, we know that like the tribal societies worldwide, the indigenous peoples, they always have a shaman, they always have elders, they always have witch doctors, they can also be called. These are the people that have the understanding of the plants which grow in their area, what the plants can be used for. They can be used maybe for mystical purposes. They can be used for divination. They can be used for going into a trance, but they can also maybe be used for healing people and for medicinal properties. And these people who would be the local shaman, they would be the ones that were the experts. Those would be the people who knew all about this. And this is something which has happened kind of worldwide. And unfortunately today it's been kind of lost in what we call the civilized world, where we think, somebody's ill, well, what do? Well, we send them to the doctor, we send them to the hospital. But in a tribal society, you'd send them to the shaman, who would know, what to prescribe. And that's also because the herbs often have more than one property, more than one use. But when I thought about that, and I thought, all these people, they came to their knowledge by trial and error, maybe over a very long period of time. And the people would have learned like what plants you could eat and what plants were poisonous and what plants you could use maybe to make a dye out of for coloring, or make a paint if you maybe want to make a face paint or something. And then maybe another plant you could eat that. And they learned all this stuff. It took them a long time, Say if you were living in a part of the world and you were trying to learn what you could do with the plants, and you ate a poisonous plant and you dropped dead, the other people in your tribe are going to say, oh, look, he ate that, and this is what's happened. Well, we won't eat that. And this is how you learn. So it was very much trial and error. But the people who became the shaman, or the wise ones, these people in any tribal society are the ones that know. They're the wise people, that they know how we use the different plants. But usually what happens is they know the plants for their area. And this is important. And it's like all over the world, we have different plants growing in different situations, different habitats, different uses for people, maybe different species of life which they support, because all species, support something else. Yeah, this is why it's such a huge, amazing jigsaw. And talk about like the oak tree, and this is why this is terrible. Like right now, that they're cutting trees down in the UK for the HS2 construction. I'm sure like a lot of you heard about that. But if you destroy an oak tree, it's not just the tree that's going; it's all the other things which depend on that tree. The little caterpillars of maybe the species of moths which feed on the leaves of the oak tree. Maybe the squirrel which eats the acorns. Maybe the birds which nest in its branches, or that collect the caterpillars that eat the leaves. Maybe the fungi that grow around the roots of the oak tree. Maybe the lichens, all that grow on the bark. All these different things all depend on that oak tree. So if you take out a tree, you're taking out a lot of different species with it. And this is why, when I look at the living things, I always think that each living thing it plays a role in the lives of other living things. And so it's all part of the magic of life for me. And as I say, it's part of, for me, it's what herbalism is about. That herbalism is about learning. It's about learning how you can use different plants. And there are many things which come together on that. You can look at, which I've looked at in my work. You can look at like what the traditional uses were. What would people in a tribal situation do with this plant? And then you can also say, what would the modern science do with it? And often it's the same thing. For example, the willow bark, this is like a well-known one, but the willow bark is a source of aspirin. So modern science would say, well, you can use aspirin, to treat pain, to treat fever. And we could go to a chemist and buy, aspirin. Or you could go to the willow tree and you get the willow bark. You could make maybe like a herbal tea out of that, and that would do the same thing. And that knowledge would be known to some shaman, of some tribe somewhere. And so it's the same knowledge and the same use for something. And there are so many different things we can do with all the plants that surround us in the world. And for me, it's why, I thought it was interesting just to look at it as a study as to the ones which were assigned under different planetary sort of rulerships, which was why I put this book together. And I'm just going to show you here. On the cover, these strange plants here are actually dragon trees. Oh, and this, I don't think I showed you. This is actually a morning glory, and it looks terrible because it's a morning glory. It flowers in the morning. In the morning, this looked beautiful. This is what's called a heavenly blue morning glory. And this morning, it was a lovely heavenly blue flower. Now it's all wilted and drooping and falling apart there. But it's one of the morning glories. The morning glory, a herb of Saturn. And I was explaining earlier, I was thinking about, like, why were the plants assigned? And I thought, okay, it's because the flower is circular. Yeah, it's a ring. And what do we know about Saturn? We know it's got rings around it. It's the planet with rings. So that, I think, is why the morning glory got assigned under Saturn. I think that's all the plants specimens. Oh no, I've got another one here. This is not a plant. This is Valerian, and I like to keep Valerian tablets or capsules here, because again, it's a herb which has got sort of tranquilizing, sedative properties. And so if I was feeling really stressed or something, or I couldn't sleep, maybe I use some Valerian. And Valerian is in my Herbs of the Northern Shaman because it has an effect on our minds. It's a tranquilizer and a sedative plant. And it's also in Herbs of the Sun, Moon, and Planets because it's a herb of Mercury. Well, I think I've covered just about everything there, but well, certainly everything that I've got sort of prepared here. But I'm not. When I say prepared, I'm prepared in that I got all my books out, and I went out and had a look around here and found some plants. And I went in my kitchen and thought, I've got some fennel here and I got some chamomile. Good. But there's loads of stuff that I can talk about, and I'm just going to quickly have a look in here. I think I've explained. Yeah. So, has anybody got any questions? I think do I have a favorite go-to herb that you use most? This is a difficult one to answer, but I'm going to go for garlic, which isn't in any of my books at all. But and I don't know what planet it was ruled by because that information I never saw when I was doing research for my book. But garlic is a culinary herb. And so, I mean, I'm vegan and I make a lot of like vegetarian dishes, and I tend to put garlic in them. And garlic is an example of, a culinary herb and a medicinal herb. For example, garlic is known for being very good for keeping the blood pressure down. Garlic is very good as a kind of an antiseptic herb. And so those are its medicinal uses, yeah. But it's also nice as a flavoring, and you have like garlic mushrooms and garlic in your pizza and garlic in your curry, and I make like vegetable curries and pasta sauces to eat with my pasta, and I always put garlic in it. So I think I could say, like, I eat garlic every day. So the fact that I eat it every day must be one of my favorite herbs. But another one, and I mean, this is like this is a difficult question to answer because I have so many. The dragon tree, which I showed you earlier, which is on the front of my book here, that is definitely a favorite herb of mine. And That's really because, as I told you, when I first saw one in Tenerife, it was kind of a wow factor moment. It was like, oh, wow, look at that. And then I also started to learn more about it then, and I learned that it was associated with the Guanche people, and I looked into all of that, and that took me off onto another subject. That took me to pyramids. Okay, but I'm not going to talk about pyramids here, only very briefly. But yeah, I got involved in researching about pyramids in Tenerife, and there are pyramids there for those of you who don't know. And there's a whole debate about these pyramids, like, you know, how were they made and when were they made, and are they real or are they not real? And but they became very much associated with the Guanches because the late Thor Heyerdahl went to live in Tenerife, and he said the pyramids there were authentic as far as he was concerned. They were like the step pyramids he'd seen on his world travels. And I got involved in all this pyramid research, and I have even been called an expert on pyramids in Tenerife. I don't know about that, but you know. And that came from my interest in the Guanches, and the Guanches were associated with the dragon tree. And the dragon tree I discovered when I first went to Tenerife, and I thought, okay, this is something I like to do anyway. I thought, like, can I grow a dragon tree? So I found some dragon tree berries, and I planted them in a pot, and they come up, and that's how I started like growing dragon trees. And then I've moved about a bit, and I'm over here in Portugal. I've been here in Portugal for 5 years. I went into Lisbon once. We went to the botanical gardens there, and I thought, oh wow, it's a dragon tree. There's a massive dragon tree there. And I've been to Gibraltar once as well, and again I saw some dragon trees there. So they become a kind of a plant which stands out for me, and a plant which I've had personal involvement in because I've been growing them. And it's a tree which, for me, attracted me to the island of Tenerife because I thought, oh, that's such an amazing thing which grows here. So that's a definite favorite, another favorite. So I have, you know, many favorites. Another one I had here was the rosemary. I love rosemary. It's got such a lovely smell to it. And some of you may know, like, I tend to rear butterflies. It's something else I do. I rear butterflies, yeah. And I have monarch butterflies and swallowtails. And when they emerge from the chrysalis, I often put them out on the rosemary bush. And then I take photos of them, and they're there in the sun on the rosemary bush. And it's a herb that I reckon, people say to me, you know, what herbs can we grow? And I say, well, rosemary is a good one because it's pretty hardy. You can grow the rosemary in a colder climate, place like the UK. You can grow the rosemary over here in the Mediterranean, in Portugal, in Spain, and Italy, which can get hot. And it grows wild over here. So it'll grow in a warm place or a cooler place. You can grow it from cuttings, you can keep it small, or you can leave it grown. It'll grow up into a big bush. And you can use it for many things. You can use it in your food as a savory herb. You can use it, you know, as a hair rinse. And it's got, you know, various medicinal properties. You know, it's thought to be good for the memory. And so it's a multi-purpose herb, and I like it. It's also evergreen. So even if it gets like really cold or really dry or really wet, whatever, you can think, oh, the rosemary is going to be okay. And the rosemary usually is. So the rosemary is one of my favorite herbs as well. And then another one I showed you earlier is the morning glory. You know, I feel kind of sad about how terrible this morning glory looks. So I'm going to see, I've got a better picture of morning glory for you. Bear with me a minute while I find a morning glory. There we are. And you see those morning glories there, the heavenly blue morning glory, which I showed you an awful specimen of. There they are. And it's a herb that, you know, for me is it's been a plant that I've cultivated just about everywhere that I've lived. I used to live in, I'm also known as the Bard of Ely. Some of you may know that. And when I used to live in Ely in Cardiff, I used to grow morning glory there. I used to grow them outside my porch, and I used to ramble up. And then I was growing them in Tenerife, and I grew them. I had like a balcony there. I used to have an apartment, and I used to grow them on the balcony. And then over here in Portugal, I'm growing the morning glory again. And for me, it's just a lovely plant. It's an example of, it's a plant that, you know, okay, yes, it has hallucinogenic properties. And okay, in my past, I used to do these things. I don't do any of that now. I just said no many, many years ago. But I can still appreciate a plant, you know, so I can grow the morning glory and I can look at it and I can think, oh, wow, what a fantastic plant that is. So it's another of my favorite herbs. And another part of the reason is it's very easy to grow. It'll ramble up and scramble over some trellis or a fence. It's got beautiful flowers. It's got heart-shaped leaves. And it's, as I told you earlier, it's a herb of Saturn. So that's something that's of interest about it. And it's a plant I've grown for many years. So it's another of my favorites. But there's so many, so many. Like, what is my favorite herb? You know, another one. This here, the mint. I love mint. Again, you know, like the rosemary, I'd say the mint is a herb that, you know, you can grow just about anywhere. It's very tough, and it's got a lovely smell. The lovely smell of mint. Great for making mint tea. As I said, I was introduced to mint when I was a little boy, and my mum used to make mint sauce. You know, you get mint in so many things, like mint flavored sweets and mint chewing gum and mint tea, and you know, everybody knows mint. And it's another of my favorites. I've got too many favorites. I've just given you asked me for a favorite. I've just given you about 5 or 6 there. Any more questions? Thank you, Steve, for a fascinating talk. Well, thank you. Thank you, Moon Books. Thank you, Moon Books, for publishing my books and also for arranging this talk. I don't know, have we got anybody else there, like viewers, with anything to ask me? I don't see any more questions coming in. This is your last chance to ask a question of me. Well, if we have no more questions, I suppose I can wind up here. But before I do, I'll just show you all my books again. Herbs of the Northern Shaman. Herbs of the Southern Shaman. And Herbs of the Sun, Moon, and Planets. And they're all available from Moon Books. Oh, another question. Are there many colors of morning glories, please? Yes, there are. That's a lovely question. Thank you for asking that. Yes, there are actually, this is something of it. This is just like a little bit of interesting information about the morning glory now. Great, I love this question. There are morning glories with kind of variegated flowers. There's one with, it's a kind of a mixture of white and a kind of a purplish bluish color in a really variegated sort of psychedelic sort of patterning on the flower. And there's a variety like that, which is called a flying saucer. Okay, I'm not making this up. There's a morning glory called the flying saucer, and there's another morning glory very similar to that called the Venetian pink, and it's got like a really kind of rosy pink and white on the flowers, and really mixed up bits of pink here, a bit of white there, and so those are two of the morning glory varieties. There's also Pearly Gates, Pearly Gates morning glory, which is a gleaming white. It's a beautiful white disc with the white flower. And I think maybe I've got any pictures. I'm just seeing if I could find. No, I've only got the Heavenly Blues, but basically, I'm sure if you Google Morning Glory, you'll find all sorts of different colors. There's a red one, kind of a scarlet red, and there are purple ones, and there are some Morning Glories which are invasive species. Here in Portugal, and also in Tenerife, in the Canary Islands, there are Morning Glories that grow wild there. And they grow like all over the place, big patches of morning glory. And they shouldn't be there. No, they're not from the Canary Islands or from Portugal, but they got brought there and they've colonized these places. And then there are the convolvulous species, which are kind of very much related to them, very similar. And I guess like you probably know about the convolvulus. You've got the greater bindweed and the lesser bindweed. The greater bindweed is the gardener's enemy. Gardeners hate the greater bindweed because if you just leave a little bit of the root in the ground, it'll come back. It's a very strong plant. But it grows up, it rambles up a fence or up a plant. And it has the white funnel-shaped flowers like the morning glory. And I'm just thinking of, like I like butterflies. There's a moth, the convolvulus hawk moth, and the caterpillar eats the convolvulus and the morning glories amongst the food plants. Okay, well, thank you for asking me about the morning glory varieties, of which there are many. What do I think of kudzu? I'm going to have to admit, I can't really answer that question. I don't know enough about it to be able to answer that. I'm sorry. I don't know everything, but as I say, the one thing for me is I'm learning all the time, and I cannot know everything. Nobody can know everything. We're all here with this amazing world in which we can learn things, but we can't learn everything. And about the kudzu, I don't know enough to really pass comment. But thank you for asking. And that's something that I can research now, something I can learn about. So it's not just you people, that are learning from me. I'm learning from you because you've just triggered something for me there to say, oh, well, Steve, what about that? I don't know. Well, now I can find out. Anything else? Thank you very much. And Pauline. Hi, Pauline. Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. And okay, I think this is going to be your last chance. Anybody with anything to say? Any questions? Well, this is going to be the end, but I said that earlier. I'm just going to tell you that this book, okay, it's got lots of lovely pictures in it. And I'm just sort of saying, this is a picture of the sweet flag, the calamus, and it's a herb of the moon because the irises and the flags are herbs of the moon. But this is not the book about this is in the Northern Shaman. And this is another nice colourful picture. There's lots of colourful pictures. The fly agaric, a magic mushroom that everybody knows about because it's in the fairy stories and it's associated with so many things, associated with Santa Claus and Coca-Cola. The mistletoe, which I mentioned earlier, is a herb of the sun. The opium poppy. And there we are. And the St. John's wort that I was talking about, the St. John's wort being the herb of the sun because of its starry appearance and because it's harvested at midsummer solstice, St. John's Day. So, and I just saw the lime tree. And the lime tree is in here, and the lime tree is a herb of mercury because it radiates out. Here's one. This is the hops. And this is a herb of Mars. So you could say maybe it's in the wrong book, you know. It's not in the wrong book because hops have been used, you know, for brewing beer, as I'm sure everybody knows. But the hop is also a sedative plant. You can make a hops pillow, and it helps, you know, it's a tranquilizer. You can go to sleep easier with a hops pillow. So that was why I put it in this book. So I've just given you there a little selection of the colourful photos which are in Herbs of Northern Shaman. And I think that's it. Unless anybody else got one more question for me? Otherwise, I'm going to leave it there. And thank you all for joining me. Thank you again to Moon Books. Anybody got any questions? Okay, well, thank you all one more time. Thank you everybody for watching this. Thank you Moon Books for hosting this. Thank you Moon Books for publishing my books, and I'll leave it there. Thank you. Good night.